Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, the president of the London Center for Policy Research, and welcome to our latest edition of Thought to Action, where we talk about specific issues and policies which are key and critical to our understanding of national security, and in this case, history. I'm joined by Dr. Bryan Mark Rigg to talk about his book, Flamethrower, Iwo Jima Medal of Honor recipient and U.S. Marine Corps Woody Williams and his controversial award, Japan's Holocaust and the War in the Pacific. Dr. Rigg is a recipient of the 2002 William E. Colby Award for his work, Hitler's Jewish Soldiers. He received his undergraduate degree from Yale, earning his honors in history. We won't talk about Yale right now, just saying, but we'll get back to that. The university subsequently awarded him the Henry Fellowship to Study at Cambridge University, where he received his MA and PhD. Since then, he has written 5 acclaimed books on World War II and the Holocaust in his newest title, Conquering Learning Disabilities at Any Age, which is always important. So, Dr. Rigg, Bryan, thank you for joining me today on Thought to Action.
Hey, thanks, Colonel, for having me.
So, as we talked about in the pre-interview, I'm pretty close to the Marines, and we know a lot of the same Marines, which is great. And there's several things I really want to talk about with you today, which I think the audience would benefit from. First, this book is considered controversial. Now, a little bit of history. Apparently, Woody Williams is currently is going to lie at the Capitol for the honor, as an honor to his passing. You want to talk a little bit about how he was given that distinction as a veteran?
Yeah, so Woody Williams is the last World War II Medal of Honor recipient to pass away.
There you go.
He did so on the 29th of June this year at the age of 98.
Wow.
And after serving very bravely in the Pacific and getting one of the 82 medals of honor that were given to Marines out of almost 700,000. He's done an awful lot of good for the nation. That's also why he's recognized. He worked 34 years in the Veterans Administration, the VA. Yeah. And then afterwards, he set up a successful horse business. And then at the end of his life, like the last 7-8 years, all through his 90s, when most people are in a retirement home, just playing cards, he's going out and he's setting up Gold Star Memorial monuments all over the nation to commemorate those families who have sacrificed a daughter or son in the line of service. So for all these reasons, he is given the honor of lying in the rotunda of the Capitol here tomorrow, Thursday, the 14th of July. And he's also symbolic now of the generation that defeated Hitler and Hirohito and that rose up, 16.3 million Americans, and fought against these horrible regimes. And he's symbolic of that sacrifice, of that duty, and how well they served democracy at that time. So yes, it's a big day in American history tomorrow that Woody, as a sergeant from World War II, is being recognized.
Yeah, no, I'm amazed and completely blown away by the sacrifice of the greatest generation, which I do believe they are, and they should be honored for that, especially Sergeant Williams. Part of what I think is significant about your work to honor Sergeant Williams is the fact that you've put together a book that actually outlines a very difficult time in our history, World War II, and one of the greatest battles that the Marine Corps has ever fought in Iwo Jima. And this man, and I've studied a little bit, I've been on the battlefield, I've been in battle, I've gone through and experienced a lot of that firsthand, but I've not experienced flamethrowers, and nor have I experienced what happens if someone who's carrying a flamethrower is shot. Now, I understand, obviously from the title, this guy carried the flamethrower. People tend to forget, Bryan, how brutal the fighting was. I mean, we're talking about rock to rock, cave to cave. And I don't believe people understand how brave and how persistent one had to be. Can you talk a little bit about the battle itself and him being a flamethrower and his experience in that effort?
Yeah. Thank you for those questions. That's the one thing that I was continually shocked by, even as a being a Marine Corps officer myself and knowing the history. As I dove into the primary resources, I was blown away, if you will, lack of a better term, of just how brutal this war was in the Pacific for Marines and Army grunts. So why was it so brutal? Well, there's many reasons. First reason is Japan, while many nations tout we're going to fight to the death, Japan is the only nation in the modern world that actually did it. They had a 98% fatality rate. So they never gave up. The Waffen SS, which a lot of people talk about being this elite, wonderful unit and they organization, and they were, once they had 30 to 40% fatality rate, they gave up, even to the Russians. That means about 30% of your unit's dead, another 30% is probably wounded, and you only have combat effectives of around 30%. Japan fought all the way until they were dead. So you had these, and they were religious fanatics. So it's like a whole bunch of Islamic terrorists that we've been able to fight, or that we're having to fight throughout the world, being equipped with a modern military.
Right.
So that was one reason why it was so brutal. Second reason is the Japanese were always digging in. Iwo Jima, by way of illustration, was an 8 square mile that had 11 miles of tunnels. So they were not on the island, they were in the island. So the way that we got to them is quite often having to burn them alive because you couldn't blow them up, you couldn't shoot them. And 1/3 of all the Japanese that died on Okinawa and Iwo Jima were incinerated, or they suffocated in the tunnels because the flamethrower sucked out all the oxygen if the flame wasn't hitting them. So that weapon system was incredibly critical to the success of the Pacific War. And you would be happy to know, Colonel Shaffer, that it was because of the Army that the Marine Corps got those flamethrowers, and the Army during World War II, because the Army noticed what the Germans did in 1940 when they took over the Low Countries and went into France, and they, like Eben Amal, the fortress there, they used flamethrowers to take them out. And the Army's like, oh my God, we got to get on the bandwagon. And even though the Germans used flamethrowers in World War I and we knew about them, we hadn't developed that technology. So the Army got on it, developed Mark I. It was a horrible model. But then when they got to Mark II, and that's what Woody used to fight the Japanese on Guam, where he fought in 44, and then Iwo Jima in 1945. And just to give people a feel for this weapon system, it had 2 huge, like, scuba tanks on the back, carried on a backpack, and that was 4.5 gallons of diesel and high-octane aviation fuel. Then you had a center tank of compressed nitrogen, and then you had a wand that in the front you had matches and a cylinder to light, and then at the back you had the trigger to let the flame go out. The flame could go out about 20 to 30 yards in front of you, and then it had a width of about 20 yards, and it was 3,500 degree heat. A body got hit with that in a couple of seconds. All the moisture was gone. The body was on fire. And it was about 100 pounds of gear. So Woody, just kind of help people understand him, he and his unit on Iwo Jima bounced up against a really tough line of Japanese defense with all these pillboxes that had interlocking fire. And this is getting to your question about why it was so brutal fighting the Japanese. On Iwo Jima, there was 5,000 reinforced positions, bunkers, pillboxes, and reinforced caves.
Right.
And they were all intertwined with each other. So that one, another reason why it was so brutal. Woody one day took his flamethrower and took out 2 to 3 of these pillboxes and killed about a dozen Japanese and was able to punch through it. But the battle signature of this weapon, because of the diesel fuel, was really big. And the signature was so big because of the black cloud. So as soon as the Japanese knew a flamethrower was operating, they start lobbing in mortars and grenades. So the lifespan of a flamethrower, according to some of the research I found, it was about 5 or 10 minutes in combat. That Woody lasted 34 days on Iwo Jima is another reason why he had, 9 lives. So those are some of the reasons, Colonel, why the battle was so brutal. The Japanese was fanatic, religious nut jobs. They were well equipped. They were entrenched. And we were fighting in hot, Pacific Islands, and we had to use horrible weapons to burn them alive to win.
And I think it's important to understand the context because there's so much revisionist history. And I appreciate, and I'm going to talk about the fact here that you used primary sources for your research. I mean, you're in your research, you use primary sources to basically tell the story. And I think that's so important because people don't understand that the Japanese were not only as brutal and fanatical as Al Qaeda and ISIS. They also they were as evil as the Nazis regarding. I was just looking up Unit 731. They did just as bad, if not worse, human experimentation to include on Americans. This is one of those things that gets lost on history. It's like, yeah, I don't dispute how terrible the Germans were to the Jews. It was horrific. But we tend to forget, Bryan, that people that the Japanese were experimenting on were Americans. You know, the Nazis never did that, but the Japanese did. And so when I'm always faced with this idea, oh, did we have to be so brutal? Did we have to be so aggressive? Did we have to use these flamethrowers and other weapons of mass destruction to? Yeah, we did. And I think this is, if nothing else, I think people ought to pick up your book to look at this, to understand the reality of combat in those days. And I would argue, you were in the Marine Corps, I've been in the Army. I don't think people fully appreciate what Sergeant Williams had to go through to be successful. And I know the snipers were always out to get him because those tanks were a juicy target. You hit those tanks and, you take out everybody around you. So this was no small issue. And I think people tend to not understand that. So let's talk a little bit about the two parts. The controversy, why is this so controversial? And how, the original sources which went into this, which I think probably helped dispel the controversy. So if you could hit those 2 points together, it'd be great.
Sure, absolutely, Colonel. If I may, before I'm writing this down, what you've just asked me to do, and source material, if I may very quickly just jump on back of what you just described to give people a little bit of a feel.
Sure,
most people
please.
Not know. You're so right to bring out about the atrocities that were going on at this time, and that the Japanese, if you can quantify evil, were worse than the Nazis. And
Yes.
How can I say that? The reason why I can say that is, okay, one, just in numbers. The Nazis slaughtered systematically innocent people to the tune of 11.7 million. We know about the 6 million Jews. A lot of people don't know about the 3.3 million Soviet prisoner of war.
All right.
And then you got tons of others, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, homosexuals, socialists, and so on. The Japanese slaughtered 30 million civilians. And the rape of Nanking, which a lot of people know about, was just one of hundreds of operations.
Right.
The rape of Hong Kong, the rape of Canton, the rape of Beijing, the rape of Singapore. I could go on and on and on.
Right.
Now, why can I say they're more evil than the Nazis? The Nazis were always trying to hide their horrible deeds. And they had to create a organization, the SS, that were these fanatics, but even they had a hard time to do the killing. But they had to create a separate entity out of their community to actually do the killing. Japan, right. It was done by everybody, and they did it out
That's
in the
a great
open.
distinction. I had not thought about that. That's a great distinction. That's a great distinction.
And they raped everywhere. They slaughtered everybody that they could put their hands on, usually in combat operations. And they were absolutely grotesque and enjoying it. Quite often you're getting laughter and people joking about this. Nazis, you don't get that an awful lot. In fact, when you had the Einsatzgruppen, who were the
Einsatzgruppe, I was about to mention them, yes.
Yeah, they were going out and shooting everybody in the back of the head and making them dig their trenches and then killing them in those trenches. A lot of these guys were suffering with horrible PTSD. They were drinking themselves to oblivion. They were committing suicide. And Himmler came up with Heydrich to do the death camps to separate the killing even more. You never had that problem with the Japanese. So I think it's very important, as you talk about Unit 731, their medical experiments, and there were hundreds of those, but also to realize that they were doing this all over the place. And getting to Americans, this is one thing that most people don't know about. The Battle of Guam, where Woody Williams fought. The 3rd Marine Division was there, and you'll be happy to know that also the 77th Infantry Division was there as well. I mean, they both helped take over this island. But what people don't know is that this was an American territory, was taken over after Pearl Harbor, where American nationals and the Japanese, horrible individuals as they are, built 7 concentration camps on American soil and killed 10% of the population there.
Mm.
And had the 77th Infantry Division and the 3rd Marine Corps Division not come there and liberated it, you would have probably had thousands of more deaths. There was only 20,000 to begin with, 2,000 died. And so that's something also important to know about American casualties that were civilian in nature. Now coming full circle after talking about the Japanese atrocities. Again, people should not forget 30 million people were slaughtered by Hirohito's minions. Now getting to the controversy. There's actually 2 major controversies in this book that I didn't expect to find. I'll take the one that is not American in nature. The first one is about General Kuribayashi. Everybody knows about this general when they watch Clint Eastwood's films, Letters from Iwo Jima and Flags of Our Fathers. And he's presented as a person who was a very good warrior, but a very ethical man. Couldn't be further from the truth. He was a good warrior.
Interesting.
But he was a mass murdering thug. And so Clint Eastwood just talks about his time at Harvard, talks about his time being a military attaché in Washington, and then talks about his innovative approach on Iwo Jima, how there was no banzai charges, and how he brought in 2,000. I mean, you don't really know the number. I found the number. 2,000 combat engineers out of his 20,000 man garrison to build this underground fortress. Remarkable engineering feat. Now, what people do not know about him that I found was that he was second in command of the 23rd Army when Hong Kong was taken over. And in 3 weeks, 50,000 civilians were slaughtered in Hong Kong and 10,000 women were raped directly under his command. And that's just one example of many of this guy who was a rapist. He brought in comfort women left and right and using this. Well, where's the controversy of all this? Well, I was on the Iwo Jima American Association board, and I got a special audience with General Kuribayashi's grandson, the Honorable Shindo, who's in the Liberal Democratic Party. He was like in the cabinet of Shinzo Abe, who just got murdered.
Right.
Yeah. So I got an audience with him. And once I got an audience with him, I told him, I'm finding these very controversial things. What do we do? Well, instead of him helping me, he tried to shut me up. He made sure I got disbanded from the board. The board
really? Wow.
Very disappointed. He tried to all the people who had been helping me in Japanese archives. So that was the first controversy, because I was just telling the truth about his grandfather, that had his grandfather survived the war at Iwo Jima, he would have been in the docket in the Tokyo war trials as a horrible, horrible war criminal. So that's the first controversy. And I'm the definitive biographer, I guess, of now Kuribayashi. That's another story in this book. Now, the second controversy is with Woody Williams. When I started this research, all I wanted to do is just praise this guy and tell about this American hero, which he is. Well, what I found is when his Medal of Honor package was making it up through the chain of command to get the endorsements from each level of command to eventually get to President Truman, I found when it got to the Fleet Marine Force commander's level, that's of all 6 Marine Corps divisions of World War II. Marines are now 2 divisions. In World War II, we were the biggest we ever were, 6 divisions.
Right.
When it got to Roy S. Geiger, Lieutenant General, he and his board noticed that the endorsement letter and the sample citation for the Medal of Honor with all the information in it did not match up with the affidavits that had been gathered to support it. There was a huge difference between what was reported Woody did versus what was written up in these official endorsements from the company level that started, his company commander. So he conferred with Fleet Admiral Nimitz and his board, and they agreed, do not push this forward. We need more evidence. And they knew that Woody's platoon commander, who had trained with him for 6 months, was in combat with him for several weeks and had witnessed everything Woody had done because he had commanded the action. He had not given an affidavit. So they're like, you know what? He'll be able to rectify the gulf of information that is between these 2 segments of the package. Right. So General Geiger wrote First Lieutenant Howard Chambers. Howard Chambers refused to endorse Woody. He wrote him back again. And he says, I need you to tell me what you saw. Howard Chambers did nothing. So at this time, it's strangest. General Krulak, 31st Commandant of the Marine Corps, said it's the strangest thing he's ever seen in any Medal of Honor package that he's ever looked at. And that Woody's own platoon commander refused to endorse him, huge red flag. And so Geiger and Nimitz agreed with this. They told Commandant Vandergrift, under no circumstances do you sign off on this and send it to Admiral Ernst King to sign off before the final sign authority of Truman.
Right.
And Commandant Vandergrift agreed. So at this time, President Truman starts putting pressure on Secretary of the Navy, Forrestal, to make critical decisions about 3 outstanding Medal of Honor candidates. And Woody was one of them. And Geiger gets word of this, that they're getting political pressure. And he says, under no circumstances, until we get the evidence, do you push this forward. Under political pressure, eventually Forrestal, mind-numbing, pulls it away from Admiral Nimitz, and General Geiger fast-tracks it to Ernst King. And then POTUS, as General Krulak said, got his alive Medal of Honor recipients because he wanted to have a big shindig in the Rose Garden on the 5th of October to celebrate the end of the war, solidify his new presidency, and then it's an apolitical, nonpartisan activity to tie the Medal of Honor around somebody's neck.
Right.
And so Woody, the controversy here is Woody probably should not have gotten the medal under normal circumstances because he had an interrupted chain of command support of his package. And the signing authority at the highest level of the Marine Corps, the Commandant and the Fleet Marine Force commander, refused to endorse him. So the irony of ironies is Woody is one of the biggest legends in the Marine Corps. He's having one of the biggest honors any Marine has ever had, being in the Capitol tomorrow. Yet the Marine Corps of 1945 refused to endorse him.
It's amazing to know. And I'm going to talk in a minute about some of the folks who endorsed your book and clearly support, Sergeant Williams getting the medal, Tony Zinni and Al Gray. But what on earth, Bryan, drove his chain of command to not endorse him? Because by all accounts, I completely believe your original research bears out that he was the hero he is. Why wouldn't the lieutenant endorse? It makes no sense to me. Was there a resentment? Was there a jealousy? I mean, to me, there's got to be something.
I explore all these issues, and we could talk multiple hours on.
Well, don't give it all away. We want people to read the book, so let them keep some mystery in the book.
Yeah, but I will do justice to your question. And we're calling him Sergeant Williams. That was his rank at the end of the war. He did go into the reserves, and his final rank after all the time in the 60s was Chief Warrant Officer 4. And that's what he will be known as tomorrow. But during World War II, you're right. He was Sergeant Williams, and I gave that rank to you, so I wanted to just make sure we got that.
Yeah, I'm glad to clarify. But during the time we're talking about his service for
Sergeant Williams, yeah,
he's Sergeant Williams for the Medal of Honor, right?
Yeah, he got the promotion right before Truman tied it around his neck.
Hey, so look, people don't know that Alvin York, Sergeant York, was actually a major during World War II. So trust me, people tend to forget that, hey, these people actually do go on and get promoted. Just saying. So,
Thank you, sir. Yeah, for that tidbit. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, I work for Sergeant York's grandson, Jerry York, and people don't understand that, there's all, like you're pointing out, there's all these historic things that people just don't know. So didn't mean to interrupt, but.
So to answer your question, why did these people not endorse? Well, it's interesting. Donald Beck, who was the company commander for Woody, who put this in originally, heard a lot of stories, and he did the endorsement process incorrectly. Although he was a phenomenal warrior in battle and one of the few company officers that survived Iwo Jima. So he heard all these stories, and from the stories, he wrote up his first endorsement. He got sign off by Colonel Withers of the regiment, and the regiment at this time was the 21st Marines. And then the regiment came back and said, okay, gather the evidence. It was almost a reverse scientific method. So then he went and got the affidavits, and the affidavits didn't match up with what was the sea tales that were going around.
Yeah, but I've been in situations like that, and people have their own perspective on events, and they're never going to measure up 100%. I know that from a number of investigations I've had to run.
Absolutely.
I mean,
but this is what's interesting. I did 20 case studies of Iwo Jima of Medal of Honor recipients. You have none of these problems with the other ones that you do with Woody. Everything is very clear, very well documented, and they do their homework before they put it up. This one is, I mean, is totally messed up. So Captain Beck, he gathers the affidavits. He must have seen there's a huge gulf, but he's like, hey, they'll work it out. He hadn't seen his wife in 2 years. He puts the package together and throws it up. And the regiment, then the division, then the corps, they all pass it. Corps is 3 Marine divisions. And then after that, it goes to the Fleet Marine Force commander. Well, these 3 levels, they didn't notice anything. But Geiger, I think, and his board made it a point to really read the evidence. And he stopped a lot of Medal of Honor, cadets, candidates, if you will. And then they got the evidence and they either pushed it forward, kept it at downgraded to a Navy Cross, or downgraded even lower to a Silver Star, depending on what the evidence told them.
Right.
So the chain of command with Geiger and Nimitz basically were very simple, saying, no, the evidence doesn't match what the sample citation was. Now, this is what's interesting. When it was pulled away from Geiger and Nimitz, they had to rewrite the citation because they couldn't substantiate the original information. And if you read Woody's citation, it's very nuanced. Took out a few pillboxes, did a lot of, dangerous deeds. Whereas the first one is exact numbers, 7 pillboxes, dozens and dozens of Japanese, all that taken out. Now getting to his platoon commander. Might have been jealousy. I mean, Woody was known to be a very ambitious a guy. Some guys thought he was too hot-headed. I mean, in some respects, that's what you want in battle. You want somebody that has a bad temper and can get things done. But he rubbed some people the wrong way. Not everybody loved him in the unit. There was something wrong. I think that the platoon. I mean, it was the absolute wrong decision for a platoon commander not to answer the general.
Well, I don't get that. I mean, especially in the Marine Corps, because I've been chewed out by some of the best Marine Corps officers. Just saying. And they don't take well to being told no, just, in my own experience.
Well, I mean, if this has continued on, had it not been pulled away politically from Geiger, I'm sure Chambers would have had some serious problems. But Chambers, I don't know all the reasons. But what's interesting, when he died, his daughter gave me the thing that he kept near his nightstand. And these 2 letters from Geiger were right by his body his entire life. He kept them. It bothered him. So all I can say as a platoon leader, in some respects, on one side, he probably didn't want to deny his Marine an award, but on the other side, he didn't feel comfortable endorsing a Marine for activities that maybe he felt didn't happen or that somebody else did. We don't know. This is the big mystery of the work, but it's the simple fact is, he refused to endorse Woody, never reached out to Woody after the war. Woody never reached out to him after the war, which is interesting. So these are a lot of things that I found that it just, if you see 1 or 2 of these things, you're like, okay, that's history. You're not always going to find the piece of the puzzle. But I was finding this left and right. And this was a very weird Medal of Honor process. And it's not what I wanted to find. I wish I found that everything was clean cut like all the others that I documented, but I found that there was many holes in this Medal of Honor process.
So, no, I appreciate the fact that you were honest in your own interrogation of history. I mean, to be honest with you, Bryan, I mean, look, a lot of folks would have stopped with challenging the Japanese narrative when they started coming at you. And for you to have to go through as a Marine to kind of just kind of put this all out there, I admire your honesty and integrity. It's like, yeah, this is what it is. And I understand it's difficult to do, especially for someone like Sergeant Williams. And it sounds like to me, there's a preponderance of the evidence that he was a hero. It's like, okay, maybe it's not all documented. And I've seen things like this before where there's personality issues. Not that I've ever been in the middle of that, but just saying. But, people don't love you if you're out there as someone who's going to get things done. And it sounds like he was a guy that got things done.
And Colonel Shaffer, sorry to talk over you a little bit, but you spurred a thought, and that is, I lost friends over this. I can't go back and ever talk to the Honorable Shindo again. He won't bring me into his office in their capital. Also, I had to go, I went sideways with Woody because he wanted more of a hagiography. He wanted just all the good stuff, none of the bad stuff. And that's not what you do as a historian.
No.
And so, you know, that was a challenging thing, you know, that, you know, we love our heroes, not because they are perfect, but because of what they do despite their imperfections.
Exactly.
And with Woody, you know, the interesting thing is when I was documenting this, I found that a lot of the stuff that was originally believed he did, it looks like he probably did not do. However, I found other things that he did on the island that didn't make it into the reports that I could have, I can document. And had they actually pulled those events that he did with what we do know he did with the affidavits that we do have, then it probably would have tipped it over to a Medal of Honor, no problem with Geiger and Nimitz. And I mentioned that.
Yeah.
You know, well, and I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
The morning of his day with the flamethrower, when he took out a few pillboxes, he was tasked with Sergeant Southwell, and he was a corporal at this time, Woody was, to go to another cave entrance that was giving enfilading fire to the unit and taking out Marines. And these two guys, since Woody was a demolition expert, took a bag of grenades. And thank God they played baseball as kids. And they were able to try to bouncing grenades into the cave entrance. And these two guys took out a cave of probably 10, 15 Japanese by attacking it, you know, outflanking it left and right. Incredible heroism. That never makes it into the affidavits. Had that been in the affidavits with what he did, when I look at other Medal of Honor recipients, that probably would have tipped it over the edge for Geiger and Nimitz, like I said. So that's just one example of many that I find how nuanced the Medal of Honor process is, how arbitrary sometimes it is, and sometimes lacking in documentation to good and bad effect.
No, I've seen the arbitrary nature of anything within a chain of command. I mean, trust me, you know, Brian, I've some of the folks you're speaking, you know, you've gone to and talked to and endorsed. I've had run-ins with them. They've had run-ins with me. It's not a perfect world. So you're always going to have to agree to disagree on some things. But it seems to me, again, to your point, the preponderance of the evidence at the time, plus the new research you've established within your effort, has established the guy was a hero and he should have gotten the reward he did. And that, I think that's the good news here. And I'm sorry that Sergeant Williams wasn't happy about the kind of the whole story, but you got to take the good with the bad, in my judgment, you know. Mm-hmm. So I again, kudos for you on your courage to be very dogged and direct and telling the story as it is, not as people want it to be. And I think that's a mark of a good historian, just saying. So.
Well, thank you, Colonel. And that leads me to the second question you wanted me to answer about the primary sources.
Right.
You know, because that's what I reported on. And you know, history is not, we don't write what we want to see, we write what we find, you know, and that's called empiricism. Through you start with questions, and then as you find evidence, you must be flexible and adapt to them. That's what my Yale University professor Henry Turner taught me. You must report the evidence. So what I did is I went to these primary sources, and I went to the National Archives in St. Louis with the personnel files. I went to College Park, Maryland, with all the operational documents that were there. And I was continually shocked at how often I got files from World War II, and they had not been opened since 1945. How do I know that?
Wow.
And this is the War of Iwo Jima, which I was shocked.
Wow.
Tim Miniger, who's a wonderful archivist there at the National Archives and helped me tremendously, I would bring out packets from these boxes with all the archive material, and they had been stapled shut and they were rusted and so on. And we would open it up, and the dates of the documents was 45, and there was, you know, secret stamps on it. And I would look at them. I'm like, am I thinking what you're thinking, that this hasn't been opened in 75, 80 years? He's like, yes. And I found that consistently. You know, I was given Howland Matt Smith, the father of amphibious warfare, his personnel file. And the last time I could see written in one of these little sheets that I had been looked at was in the 60s, trying to figure out how much he should be paid in disability and retirement as a general.
Wow.
As you know, it wasn't looked at as a historian. And here's one of the greatest generals of the Marine Corps. So I was finding these gems left and right, and I was expecting to find out about the Battle of Guam, where Woody fought. But I wasn't expecting to find out about the Battle of Iwo Jima are these great personalities I was finding. So then when you go down the chain of command, and I was looking at Woody's entire chain of command, all the majors, all the captains, all the lieutenant colonels, the colonels, and so on, many of their personnel files have never been looked at. And then what I would do is I would get the entire telephone book of America, and I'd find their families. And then I write the families. And then I got their letters and their diaries and their understanding of their father and so on. And then I interviewed all these group of guys in the 70th commemoration of the Battle of Iwo Jima, and there was over 30 veterans. And I intertwined all their stories into the book. So I had their oral history from 2015, and then I went to the archives and found their personnel files. So that's how I did my research, primary research. And that was finding all these documents that were revealing information that nobody really knew about. I went to China. I went to the second Chinese, it's called the Second Chinese National Archives. And it's this huge center, like 5 basketball courts size viewing room. And I was like the only guy there. And I got the entire file on Kuribayashi, the rape of Nanking, and the rape of Hong Kong. Nobody looked at this really.
Yeah.
And so these are the type of stuff I was finding, and this is, I think, what makes the book so unique.
So no, I look, Bryan, this has been wonderful, and a couple of the folks who endorsed your book, I think, speak volumes. Former Commandant General Kurlock, who I don't know personally, but I've heard great things about. 29th Commandant of the Marine Corps, Al Gray. I know General Gray, great guy. I've worked with him in the past on special projects. And of course, my friend, Tony Zinni, former Commandant of Central Command, who himself has shown a great deal of courage. There's things he's done that he's not been fully credited with. So I admire the fact that these men that have been legends in the Marine Corps have stepped up to support your book and the research you did for Sergeant Williams. So Bryan, your book's out at Amazon. Where else is your book available right now?
Yeah, Amazon. There's 3 mediums: Audible, Kindle, and then the hardback.
I'm going to pick it up on Audible. Just telling you, I'm going to get that on Audible.
Okay, hey, yeah, it's me reading it, so hopefully I do it.
No, it's great. I'll look forward. I'll let you know one way or another. I'll let you know.
Hey,
so,
thank you, and then I have a website if people want to know about my work.
Yeah, what is your website?
Yeah, BryanMarkRigg.com. Bryan, like Y in Yankee, Mark with a K as in kilo, and then Rigg with 2 G's. So BryanMarkRigg.com is also where people can find out about my work.
So I can't make any guarantees, but we do. I owe, just so you let you know, I owe John Lehman a book signing at the Union League Club. So if we can get our in-person events going again, we'll try to ask you up to New York to do something. I can't make any guarantees, but we'd like to consider that. John Lehman did a book. I'm looking at it right now. It's has to do with Oceans Ventured. It's how John Lehman won the Cold War by himself with the Navy. Just saying. John, I'm just joking. It's a joke, John. Don't get upset with me. So, but I promised him we would do. But we were going to try to get back to doing book. COVID. Geez, it's just kind of slowed us all down. But it sounds like you would have a great discussion with the audience we bring to the table. So again, I can't make a guarantee, but I think that'd be.
I've given several talks to the Union League in Chicago.
So. Well, this will be the Union League in New York, so we'll see if we can do something like that. But yeah, this is great. It's been a pleasure meeting you and talking to you, Bryan. I'm just at awe about the work you've done, and I appreciate your integrity. Because I mean, like I said, it's just so refreshing to see real research and real history. So God bless you for what you've done, and we hope to have you back sometime to talk more about this if you'd be open to that.
Oh, absolutely, Colonel Shaffer. Thank you so much for having me, sir.
Sure. And so thank you all for joining us for Thought to Action. We're on all of the different social media, Twitter. Well, I'm not on Twitter, but we're on Twitter. Truth Social, TikTok. No, we're not on TikTok yet. I'm just kidding about that. But we are on Facebook and all the other outlets. So be sure and look and check us out on YouTube primarily, because that's where we're at, where we actually talk about key policy issues, key national security issues, and clearly things like this where we're talking about real events, real heroes, and real history. So for the London Center for Policy Research, I'm Tony Shaffer. Thanks for joining us.